Friday practice at Abu Dhabi is over, and the fastest driver of the day was Lando Norris and McLaren, as McLaren are looking very fast going into the final race. But what did we learn? Well, in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at the data and doing a data analysis from practice. If you enjoy the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But now, let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top teams later on, so please do stick around for that. Yep, Friday is over, and McLaren are looking very strong so far, as it was a pretty dominant FP2 for them. As usual with practice at Abu Dhabi, FP1 is a lot less relevant due to the climatic conditions. In FP2, they run during the day, and FP2 is run during the twilight hours, much like what you would see when the Grand Prix begins. Because of this, a lot of teams choose to save the rookies test for the Abu Dhabi weekend, which meant that we got to see both Charles and Arthur Leclerc in the Ferrari at the same time in FP1. Although we very nearly didn't with Charles Leclerc, but we will get to that a little bit later on. Now though, let's see how the times from FP1 to FP2 compared by taking a look at the fastest lap from both sessions. And what can you see? Well, what you can see when you look at these two lap times, it has to be said, is Charles Leclerc did a fantastic job in the first practice session. Because, well, the time difference is nowhere near as much as what we would usually see, as there is only 8 tenths between them. To be honest, the majority of the difference as well is made up right at the start of the lap, going through turn 1, 2 and 3 at the medium speed corners. It is in general the medium speed corners where Lando Norris and McLaren have a big advantage. The next area where McLaren makes a big advantage is right at the end of the long straight, heading into the tight hairpin braking zone, which would make sense given the extra grip during the evening session, and also with temperatures being a lot more nicer for the tyres. The final spot where Norris carries clearly more speed is at the final corner, which again would make sense since it is a low medium speed corner. Overall, like I said, the lap time only improved by 8 tenths from FP1 to FP2, which is nowhere near the amount that you would usually expect. So it's going to be interesting to see how the times evolve for FP3 and qualifying. So we've now seen how the times compared, but let's now see how the teams were looking when it comes to the top speeds. And what can we see here? Well, what we can see is that the Sauber cars are very fast in a straight line. Sauber have had a very rough season, but they are finally recovering right at the end of it, and they're starting to get more speed, not just down the straights, but also through the corners. Bottas had a very solid day, and he finished in 7th place. Red Bull are also looking pretty fast in a straight line, although I don't expect that to last, because that was only with Max Verstappen, as he managed to hit 329 km/h. His teammate Sergio Perez was actually running with more downforce, as he was trying to get a better understanding of the car with a little bit more grip, and he was only able to hit 325 km/h. Finally, the slowest car in a straight line was actually the fastest car over a lap, which was McLaren, as it looks as though they're running with a bit more downforce. With that in mind, I do expect to see some other teams probably increase their rear wing levels and increase the amount of downforce that they will be running heading into qualifying, which would also make sense when you look at the difference between the two Red Bull drivers. In the midfield then, what team is looking good so far? Well, in the very tight battle between Haas and Alpine, the faster car was the Haas car, as Nico Hülkenberg was an incredible P3 today, and teammate Kevin Magnussen was in 8th place. Meanwhile, Pierre Gasly was down in 12th place in the Alpine, and teammate Jack Doohan, who is still trying to get up to speed, was only 19th. This is exactly what Haas need right now. The circuit is one that should suit them nicely, and if they can keep this up, then expect them to jump back ahead of Alpine and finish in 6th place in the Constructors' Championship. And when you take a look at the two laps between Hülkenberg and Gasly, you can actually see it's pretty close between the two of them until you get to Sector 3. When it comes to that final sector, Nico Hülkenberg clearly is able to carry more speed through the technical and tight corners, and in the final sector alone, Hülkenberg gains 0.4 of a second. I do wonder if the soft tyres that Gasly was running were just starting to fade and probably start overheating through those difficult corners, whereas Hülkenberg was able to keep them alive. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But now, let's get back to the video and let's talk about Mercedes. For Mercedes, it is looking like right now they could be in a pretty good position. Lewis Hamilton is entering his final race for the team, and he was 5th in FP2. Meanwhile, teammate George Russell, I think, made a bit of a mistake during his lap because he was only in 13th place. But he was still ahead at least of his newfound rival Max Verstappen. And in the race run as well, at the end of the session, it does look like Mercedes are looking strong. And you can see that here when you look at the long run of Lewis Hamilton and compare it to Charles Leclerc. You can see here that, in general, Leclerc doesn't really have the pace of Hamilton, and this can give the Silver Arrows team some confidence. Going into tomorrow, it will be interesting to see if they can really keep it up. If they can, then they could really spoil Ferrari's somewhat slim hopes of winning the Constructors' Championship. For Red Bull then, today was a disaster. There is no other way around it. They chose to run 2 different setups to try and figure how they want to go for the rest of the weekend. But instead, we just saw both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez a long way off the pace. Verstappen was running with a bit less downforce, while Perez was running with extra downforce. And when you look at the longer run of both drivers, for the first time in quite a while, Sergio Perez was actually the faster driver, which goes back to what I was saying earlier, where some teams might be looking to increase the amount of downforce that they run for Saturday and Sunday. Perez had more downforce and was faster, which almost never happens. And when you compare the fastest lap of the 2 drivers as well, you can see that Perez is able to carry more minimum apex speed at some of the corners. But Verstappen comes back quite clearly down the straights with that reduced downforce. I have a feeling if Max had the same downforce as Perez, he would be a lot faster. But even so, it's not a great look for them right now, and they have a lot of work to do overnight. But as we have seen so many times from the Red Bull team, if there is one team that can bounce back and make those changes overnight to get themselves back up to pace, it is Red Bull. So I still expect to see them bounce back quite nicely for Saturday and Sunday. For Ferrari then, their somewhat slim title hopes have taken a bit of a hit, as Charles Leclerc is taking a 10-place penalty for a change in power unit components. I have been saying pretty much since Mexico that I expected them to be taking a penalty, but it looks as though they tried to take a risk and get away with not having to take any additional parts. But in the final race, just when the championship is on the line, it blows up in Ferrari's face and they have to take that penalty. And it has made their weekend a lot more difficult. It was somewhat always out of their hands if they wanted to win the Constructors, because they really needed a McLaren driver not to finish the race, and for them to bounce back massively. When you compare the long runs of Leclerc to Norris as well, it doesn't paint a pretty picture for the Scuderia, as Leclerc is looking slower than Norris over the longer runs, which really shows how strong McLaren are looking currently. That being said, as I have said before, I expect more teams to increase downforce like McLaren have, so there is a chance Ferrari will come back towards them, but I will be surprised if they can do enough to win the Constructors' Championship. And finally, for McLaren then, it is looking like they now have one hand firmly on the Constructors' Championship, and the other one is pretty much there as well, because they are looking very strong. They were first and second, and in the long runs, they are in a great position. I think they have got the downforce levels more correct than the other teams so far, which might explain this, but in general, they are looking very good. The medium to high speed corners is very nicely working in their favour, and I expect that they will win the Constructors' Championship now, and probably will have at least one of their cars on the podium in the Grand Prix. So, for the final time this season, what are my qualifying predictions for the Grand Prix? Well, in P5, I am going to go for Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. P4 will be George Russell in the Mercedes. P3 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P2 will be Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, before of course he has to take a penalty. And I think Lando Norris will take pole position. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.